Continent Earth defined. A continent is any of several large land masses, generally identified by convention rather than any strict criteria. Up to 7 geographical regions are commonly regarded as continents. Ordered from largest in area to smallest, these 7 regions are Asia, Africa, North America, South America, Antarctica, Europe, and Australia. Variations with fewer continents may merge some of these. For example, America, Eurasia, or Afro-Eurasia are sometimes treated as single continents, which can bring the total number as low as 4. Zealandia, a largely submerged mass of continental crust, has also been described as a continent. Oceanic islands are frequently grouped with a nearby continent to divide all the world's land into geographical regions. Under this scheme, most of the island countries and territories in the Pacific Ocean are grouped together with the continent of Australia to form a geographical region called Oceania. In geology, a continent is defined as one of Earth's major land masses, including both dry land and continental shelves. The geological continents correspond to 6 large areas of continental crust that are found on the tectonic plates, but exclude small continental fragments such as Madagascar that are generally referred to as microcontinents. Continental crust is only known to exist on Earth. The idea of continental drift gained recognition in the 20th century. It postulates that the current continents formed from the breaking up of a supercontinent Pangaea have formed hundreds of millions of years ago. Definitions and application. By convention, continents are understood to be large, continuous, discrete masses of land ideally separated by expanses of water. In modern schemes with 5 or more recognized continents, at least one pair of continents is joined by land in some way. The criterion largely leads to arbitrary classification. Greenland, with a surface area of 2,166,086 square kilometers, 836,330 sq mi, is only considered the world's largest island, while Australia, at 7,617,930 square kilometers, 2,941,300 sq mi, is deemed the smallest continent. Earth's major land masses all have coasts on a single, continuous world ocean, which is divided into a number of principal oceanic components by the continents and various geographic criteria. Extent. The most restricted meaning of continent is that of a continuous area of land or mainland, with the coastline and any land boundaries forming the edge of the continent. In this sense, the term continental Europe, sometimes referred to in Britain as the continent, is used to refer to mainland Europe excluding islands such as Great Britain, Iceland, Ireland, and Malta, while the term continent of Australia may refer to the mainland of Australia excluding New Guinea, Tasmania, and other nearby islands. Similarly, the continental United States refers to the 49 states including Alaska but excluding Hawaii, located on the continent of North America, and the District of Columbia. From the perspective of geology or physical geography, continent may be extended beyond the confines of continuous dry land to include the shallow submerged adjacent area, the continental shelf, and the islands on the shelf. Continental islands, as they are structurally part of the continent. From this perspective, the edge of the continental shelf is the true edge of the continent, as shorelines vary with changes in sea level. In this sense, the islands of Great Britain and Ireland are part of Europe, while Australia and the island of New Guinea together form a continent. As a cultural construct, the concept of a continent may go beyond the continental shelf to include oceanic islands and continental fragments. In this way, Iceland is considered a part of Europe and Madagascar a part of Africa. Extrapolating the concept to its extreme, some geographers group the Australian continental landmass with other islands in the Pacific Ocean into one quasi-continent called Oceania. This divides the entire land surface of Earth into continents or quasi-continents. Separation. The criterion that each continent is a discrete landmass is commonly relaxed due to historical conventions and practical use. Of the seven most globally recognized continents, only Antarctica and Australia are completely separated from other continents by the ocean. Several continents are defined not as absolutely distinct bodies, but as more or less discrete masses of land. Africa and Asia are joined by the Isthmus of Suez, and North America and South America by the Isthmus of Panama. In both cases, there is no complete separation of these land masses by water disregarding the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, which are both narrow and shallow, as well as man-made. Both of these isthmuses are very narrow compared to the bulk of the land masses they unite. North America and South America are treated as separate continents in the seven-continent model. However, they may also be viewed as a single continent known as America. This viewpoint was common in the United States until World War II and remains prevalent in some Asian six-continent models. The single American continent model remains a more common view in France, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Malta, Portugal, Spain, and Latin American countries. The criterion of a discrete land mass is completely disregarded if the continuous land mass of Eurasia is classified as two separate continents, Asia and Europe. Physiographically, Europe and the Indian subcontinent are large peninsulas of the Eurasian landmass. However, Europe is widely considered a continent with its comparatively large land area of 10,180,000 square kilometers, 3,930,000 sq mi, while the Indian subcontinent, with less than half that area, is considered a subcontinent. The alternative view in geology and geography that Eurasia is a single continent results in a six-continent view of the world. Some view separation of Eurasia into Asia and Europe as a residue of Eurocentrism. In physical, cultural, and historical diversity, China and India are comparable to the entire European landmass, not to a single European country. However, for historical and cultural reasons, the view of Europe as a separate continent continues in several categorizations. If continents are defined strictly as discrete land masses, embracing all the contiguous land of a body, then Africa, Asia, and Europe form a single continent which may be referred to as Afro-Eurasia. Combined with the consolidation of the Americas, this would produce a four-continent model consisting of Afro-Eurasia, America, Antarctica, and Australia. When sea levels were lowered during the Pleistocene ice ages, greater areas of continental shelf were exposed as dry land, forming land bridges between Tasmania and the Australian mainland. At those times, Australia and New Guinea were a single, continuous continent known as Sahel. Likewise, Afro-Eurasia and the Americas were joined by the Bering Land Bridge. Other islands, such as Great Britain, were joined to the mainlands of their continents. At that time, there were just three discrete landmasses in the world: Africa, Eurasia, America, Antarctica, and Australia, New Guinea, Sahel. There are several ways of distinguishing the continents. The seven-continent model is usually taught in most English-speaking countries, including Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and also in Bangladesh, China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Pakistan, the Philippines, Suriname, and parts of Western Europe. The six-continent combined Eurasia model is mostly used in Russia and Eastern Europe. The six-continent combined America model is taught in countries that speak Romance languages and Greece. The Olympic flag's 5 rings represent the 5 inhabited continents of the combined America model, but excludes the uninhabited Antarctica. Some geographers use the term Oceania for a geographical region which includes most of the island countries and territories in the Pacific Ocean as well as the continent of Australia. Area and population. The following table provides areas given by Encyclopaedia Britannica for each continent in accordance with the seven-continent model, including Australia along with Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia as part of Oceania. It also provides populations of continents according to 2021 estimates by the United Nations Statistics Division based on the UNGA scheme, which includes all of Russia, i.e. including Siberia as part of Europe, but all of Azerbaijan, Cyprus, Georgia, Kazakhstan, and Turkey, i.e. including East Thrace as part of Asia. Not usually considered a continent in the English-speaking countries. Other divisions. Supercontinents. Apart from the current continents, the scope and meaning of the term continent includes past geological ones. Supercontinents, largely in evidence earlier in the geological record, are land masses that comprise most of the world's cratons or continental cores. These have included Bulbara, Kenwerland, Columbia, Rhydynia, Pannotia, and Pangaea. Over time, these supercontinents broke apart into large land masses which formed the present continents. Subcontinents. Certain parts of continents are recognized as subcontinents, especially the large peninsulas separated from the main continental landmass by geographical features. The most widely recognized example is the Indian subcontinent, the Arabian Peninsula, the southern cone of South America, and Alaska in North America might be considered further examples. In many of these cases, the subcontinents concerned are on different tectonic plates from the rest of the continent, providing a geological justification for the terminology. Greenland, generally reckoned as the world's largest island on the northeastern periphery of the North American plate, is sometimes referred to as a subcontinent. This is a significant departure from the more conventional view of a subcontinent as comprising a very large peninsula on the fringe of a continent. Where the Americas are viewed as a single continent, America, it is divided into two subcontinents, North America and South America, or three, Central America being the third. When Eurasia is regarded as a single continent, Europe is treated as a subcontinent. Submerged continents. Some areas of continental crust are largely covered by the ocean and may be considered submerged continents. Notable examples are Zealandia, emerging from the ocean primarily in New Zealand and New Caledonia, and the almost completely submerged Kerguelen Plateau in the southern Indian Ocean. Microcontinents. Some islands lie on sections of continental crust that have rifted and drifted apart from a main continental landmass. While not considered continents because of their relatively small size, they may be considered microcontinents. Madagascar, the largest example, is usually considered an island of Africa, but its divergent evolution has caused it to be referred to as the eighth continent from a biological perspective. History of the concept. Early concepts of the Old World continents. The term continent translates the Greek word letter 1F2 for pi epsilon iot rho omicron sigma, meaning landmass. Terra firma, the proper name of Epirus, and later especially used for Asia, i.e. Asia Minor. The first distinction between continents was made by ancient Greek mariners who gave the names Europe and Asia to the lands on either side of the waterways of the Aegean Sea, the Dardanelles Strait, the Sea of Marmara, the Bosporus Strait, and the Black Sea. The names were first applied just to lands near the coast and only later extended to include the hinterlands. But the division was only carried through to the end of navigable waterways, and beyond that point the Hellenic geographers never succeeded in laying their finger on any inland feature in the physical landscape that could offer any convincing line for partitioning an indivisible Eurasia. Ancient Greek thinkers subsequently debated whether Africa, then called Lydia, should be considered part of Asia or a third part of the world. Division into three parts eventually came to predominate. From the Greek viewpoint, the Aegean Sea was the center of the world, Asia lay to the east, Europe to the north and west, and Africa to the south. The boundaries between the continents were not fixed. Early on, the Europe-Asia boundary was taken to run from the Black Sea along the Rioi River known then as the Phasis in Georgia Later it was viewed as running from the Black Sea through Kerch Strait, the Sea of Azov, and along the Don River known then as the Tanais in Russia. The boundary between Asia and Africa was generally taken to be the Nile River. Herodotus in the 5th century BC objected to the whole of Egypt being split between Asia and Africa Libya, and took the boundary to lie along the western border of Egypt, regarding Egypt as part of Asia. He also questioned the division into three of what is really a single landmass, a debate that continues nearly 2.5 millennia later. Eratosthenes, in the 3rd century BC, noted that some geographers divided the continents by rivers the Nile and the Don, thus considering them islands. Others divided the continents by isthmuses, calling the continents peninsulas. These latter geographers set the border between Europe and Asia at the isthmus between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, and the border between Asia and Africa at the isthmus between the Red Sea and the mouth of Lake Bardawil on the Mediterranean Sea. The Roman Empire did not attach a strong identity to these continental divisions. However, following the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the culture that developed in its place, linked to Latin and the Catholic Church, began to associate itself with the concept of Europe. Through the Roman period and the Middle Ages, a few writers took the Isthmus of Suez as the boundary between Asia and Africa, but most writers continued to consider it the Nile or the western border of Egypt. Gibbon. In the Middle Ages, the world was usually portrayed on T&O maps, with the T representing the waters dividing the three continents. By the middle of the 18th century, the fashion of dividing Asia and Africa at the Nile, or at the Great Catabathmus, the boundary between Egypt and Libya farther west, had even then scarcely passed away. European arrival in the Americas. Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic Ocean to the West Indies in 1492, sparking a period of European exploration of the Americas. But despite 4 voyages to the Americas, Columbus never believed he had reached a new continent. He always thought it was part of Asia. In 1501, Amerigo Vespucci and Gonzalo Siljo attempted to sail around what they considered the southern end of the Asian mainland into the Indian Ocean, passing through Fernando de Noronha. After reaching the coast of Brazil, they sailed a long way farther south along the coast of South America, confirming that this was a land of continental proportions, and that it also extended much farther south than Asia was known to. On return to Europe, an account of the voyage, called Mundus Novus New World, was published under Vespucci's name in 1502 or 1503, although it seems that it had additions or alterations by another writer. Regardless of who penned the words, Mundus Novus credited Vespucci with saying, "I have discovered a continent in those southern regions that is inhabited by more numerous people and animals than our Europe, or Asia, or Africa," the first known explicit identification of part of the Americas as a continent like the other 3. Within a few years, the name New World began appearing as a name for South America on world maps, such as the Oliveriana Pissarro map of around 1504-1505. Maps of this time, though, still showed North America connected to Asia, and showed South America as a separate land. In 1507, Martin Waldseemüller published a world map, Universalis Cosmographia, which was the first to show North and South America as separate from Asia and surrounded by water. A small inset map above the main map explicitly showed for the first time the Americas being east of Asia and separated from Asia by an ocean, as opposed to just placing the Americas on the left end of the map and Asia on the right end. In the accompanying book Cosmographiae Introductio, Waldseemüller noted that the Earth is divided into 4 parts: Europe, Asia, Africa, and the 4th part, which he named America after Amerigo Vespucci's first name. On the map, the word America was placed on part of South America. The word continent. From the 16th century, the English noun continent was derived from the term continent land, meaning continuous or connected land, and translated from the Latin terra continens. The noun was used to mean a connected or continuous tract of land or mainland. It was not applied only to very large areas of land in the 17th century. References were made to the continents or mainlands of Isle of Man, Ireland and Wales, and in 1745 to Sumatra. The word continent was used in translating Greek and Latin writings about the three parts of the world, although in the original languages no word of exactly the same meaning as continent was used. While continent was used on the one hand for relatively small areas of continuous land, on the other hand geographers again raised Herodotus's query about why a single large land mass should be divided into separate continents. In the mid-17th century, Peter Heylin wrote in his Cosmography that a continent is a great quantity of land not separated by any sea from the rest of the world, as the whole continent of Europe, Asia, Africa. In 1727, Ephraim Chambers wrote in his Cyclopedia, "The world is ordinarily divided into two grand continents, the Old and the New." And in his 1752 Atlas, Emmanuel Bowen defined a continent as a large space of dry land comprehending many countries all joined together without any separation by water. Thus Europe, Asia, and Africa is one great continent, as America is another. However, the old idea of Europe, Asia, and Africa as parts of the world ultimately persisted, with these being regarded as separate continents. Beyond four continents. From the late 18th century, some geographers started to regard North America and South America as two parts of the world, making five parts in total. Overall, though, the fourfold division prevailed well into the 19th century. Europeans discovered Australia in 1606, but for some time it was taken as part of Asia. By the late 18th century, some geographers considered it a continent in its own right, making it the sixth or fifth for those still taking America as a single continent. In 1813, Samuel Butler wrote of Australia as New Holland, an immense island, which some geographers dignify with the appellation of another continent, and the Oxford English Dictionary was just as equivocal some decades later. It was in the 1950s that the concept of Oceania as a great division of the world was replaced by the concept of Australia as a continent. Antarctica was sighted in 1820 during the first Russian Antarctic expedition and described as a continent by Charles Wilkes on the United States exploring expedition in 1838, the last continent identified, although a great Antarctic Antipodean landmass had been anticipated for millennia. An 1849 atlas labeled Antarctica as a continent, but few atlases did so until after World War II. Over time, the Western concept of dividing the world into continents spread globally, replacing conceptions in other areas of the world. The idea of continents continued to become imbued with cultural and political meaning. In the 19th century, during the Meiji period, Japanese leaders began to self-identify with the concept of being Asian and renew relations with other Asian countries while conceiving of the idea of Asian solidarity against Western countries. This conception of an Asian identity, as well as the idea of Asian solidarity, was later taken up by others in the region, such as Republican China and Vietnam. From the mid-19th century, atlases published in the United States more commonly treated North and South America as separate continents, while atlases published in Europe usually considered them one continent. However, it was still not uncommon for American atlases to treat them as one continent up until World War II. From the 1950s, most U.S. geographers divided the Americas into two continents. With the addition of Antarctica, this made the seven-continent model. However, this division of the Americas never appealed to Latin Americans, who saw their region spanning in America as a single landmass, and there the conception of six continents remains dominant, as it does in scattered other countries. Some geographers regard Europe and Asia together as a single continent, dubbed Eurasia. In this model, the world is divided into six continents, with North America and South America considered separate continents. Geology. Geologists use the term continent in a different manner from geographers. In geology, a continent is defined by continental crust, which is a platform of metamorphic and igneous rock, largely of granitic composition. Continental crust is less dense and much thicker than oceanic crust, which causes it to float higher than oceanic crust on the dense underlying mantle. This explains why the continents form high platforms surrounded by deep ocean basins. Some geologists restrict the term continent to portions of the crust built around stable regions called cratons. Cratons have largely been unaffected by mountain-building events orogenes since the Precambrian. A craton typically consists of a continental shield surrounded by a continental platform. The shield is a region where ancient crystalline basement rock, typically 1.5 to 3.8 billion years old, is widely exposed at the surface. The platform surrounding the shield is also composed of ancient basement rock, but with a cover of younger sedimentary rock. The continents are accretionary crustal rafts that, unlike the denser basaltic crust of the ocean basins, are not subjected to destruction through the plate tectonic process of subduction. This accounts for the great age of the rocks comprising the continental cratons. The margins of geologic continents are either active or passive. An active margin is characterized by mountain building, either through a continent-on-continent collision or a subduction zone. Continents grow by accreting lighter volcanic island chains and microcontinents along these active margins, forming orogens. At a passive margin, the continental crust is stretched thin by extension to form a continental shelf, which tapers off with a gradual slope covered in sediment, connecting it directly to the oceanic crust beyond. Most passive margins eventually transition into active margins, where the oceanic plate becomes too heavy due to cooling. It disconnects from the continental crust and starts subducting below it, forming a new subduction zone. There are many microcontinents, or continental fragments, that are built of continental crust but do not contain a craton. Some of these are fragments of Gondwana or other ancient cratonic continents, Zealandia, which includes New Zealand and New Caledonia, Madagascar, the northern Mascarenes Plateau, which includes the Seychelles. Other islands, such as several in the Caribbean Sea, are composed largely of granitic rock as well, but all continents contain both granitic and basaltic crust, and there is no clear boundary as to which islands would be considered microcontinents under such a definition. The Kerguelen Plateau, for example, is largely volcanic, but is associated with the breakup of Gondwanaland and is considered a microcontinent, whereas volcanic Iceland and Hawaii are not. The British Isles, Sri Lanka, Borneo, and Newfoundland were on the margins of the Laurasian continent, only separated from the main continental landmass by inland seas flooding its margins. The movement of plates has caused the continual formation and breakup of continents, and occasionally supercontinents, in a process called the Wilson cycle. The supercontinent Columbia or Nunna formed during a period of 2.0-1.8 billion years ago and broke up about 1.5-1.3 billion years ago. The supercontinent Rodinia is thought to have formed about 1 billion years ago and to have embodied most or all of Earth's continents, and broken up into 8 continents around 600 million years ago. The 8 continents later reassembled into another supercontinent called Pangaea. Pangaea broke up into Laurasia, which became North America, and Eurasia and Gondwana, which became the remaining continents. Highest and lowest points. The following table lists the 7 continents with their highest and lowest points on land, sorted in decreasing highest points. Some sources list the Kuma-Manich Depression, a remnant of the Paratethys, as the geological border between Europe and Asia. This would place the Caucasus outside of Europe, thus making Mont Blanc elevation 4,000 810 m in the Grayan Alps, the highest point in Europe. The lowest point would still be the shore of the Caspian Sea.
Thank you for watching. Consider supporting the channel, leave a like and subscribe.